The billionaire sat in his luxury car, gazing out of the window as the city lights flickered by. He was late for a meeting, his mind consumed with thoughts of numbers, profits, and the high-stakes world he lived in. But in that fleeting moment, something happened that would shatter his carefully constructed life forever. A sharp screeching sound broke through his thoughts. His car swerved violently, the tires screeching as the vehicle slid across the slick road. Before he could even process the danger, the car hit a nearby guardrail and flipped over. The world turned upside down, and everything went black. When he regained consciousness, he was disoriented, struggling to make sense of the wreckage surrounding him. Blood dripped from his forehead, and pain shot through his body, but something else was happening. A voice, a calm, steady voice, was calling to him, trying to reach him through the haze of his mind. "Hold on. You're going to be okay." His vision blurred, but he could see a figure standing outside the wreckage. A woman. Her face was serene, almost glowing in the moonlight as she moved closer to him. Her presence seemed to calm the chaos in his mind. It was a strange feeling, this unexplainable sense of safety, as though the world itself had slowed down just for him. She knelt beside him, her hands moving swiftly, but gently, to assess his injuries. Her eyes were filled with an unexpected intensity, a calmness he couldn't understand but was deeply drawn to. She spoke again, her words quiet but firm. "Stay with me. I've got you." Somehow, against all odds, the woman managed to pull him free from the wreckage, dragging him with a strength that seemed beyond human. He could hardly believe it. A woman, small, unassuming, had just saved his life in a way that no one else could have. As he lay there, struggling to breathe, he noticed something strange. Despite the severity of the crash, despite the danger, the woman was unaffected. There was no panic, no fear. Just quiet determination. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, an ambulance arrived. Paramedics took over, lifting him onto a stretcher. He wanted to ask her how she had done it, how she had pulled him from the wreckage so effortlessly, but his mouth wouldn't work. All he could do was stare at her as they loaded him into the ambulance, her face etched into his mind. The ride to the hospital was a blur. The paramedics worked frantically to stabilize him, but all he could think about was the mysterious woman who had saved him. Who was she? How had she known what to do? Why had she been there at the exact moment he needed her most? The billionaire's world, once dominated by control and certainty, had been flipped upside down in a matter of minutes. And in the midst of it all, there was this woman, a stranger, yet somehow not a stranger at all, whose presence had changed everything. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a coincidence. Something deeper was at play, something that he couldn't yet understand. As the ambulance rushed toward the hospital, he closed his eyes, still haunted by the memory of her calm, determined eyes. He knew that this was only the beginning. What happened next would shape the rest of his life, in ways he could never have imagined. But for now, he could only wonder, who was this woman? And why had she saved him? The billionaire woke up in a sterile hospital room, the scent of antiseptic filling the air. His body ached, every muscle protesting the ordeal he had just gone through. But there was one thing that stood out more than the pain. His mind was racing, consumed by one thought, the woman who had saved him. As he sat up slowly, the pain intensifying with every movement, a nurse entered the room, her smile professional yet distant. She checked his vitals, but he barely registered the numbers as they were spoken aloud. "Are you feeling better, sir?" the nurse asked, her tone polite. "Yes," he replied, his voice raspy from the crash. "But, where is she? The woman who saved me?" The nurse looked at him, her expression blank. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir. There was no woman here when we arrived. Just the paramedics." He furrowed his brow. That couldn't be right. He had clearly seen her, felt her presence. He could still hear her voice in his head, as clear as if she were standing beside him now. She had been there, pulling him from the wreckage, her hands steady and strong. Something didn't add up. Unable to shake the feeling that something extraordinary had just happened, the billionaire insisted on leaving the hospital early. His doctors cautioned him against it, but he refused to listen. He had to find her, had to understand who she was. His instincts, usually honed by years of business deals and acquisitions, told him there was more to this story than met the eye. After his release, he immediately began looking into the incident. His mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? How had she done it? He reached out to the police, but no one had any information on her. The paramedics had arrived to find him alone, and no records showed that anyone had assisted them before they reached the crash site. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. Her calm demeanor, her presence, there was something about her that felt otherworldly. It was a strange, almost unsettling thought. The idea that someone so unremarkable, someone who didn't even seem to belong in his world, could possess such power, such grace. That night, unable to shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial, the billionaire began digging into her presence. He hired private investigators, looked through all available footage from nearby cameras, and even asked friends and colleagues if anyone had seen her. But nothing turned up. She was a ghost, slipping through the cracks of his reality, always just out of reach. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no sign of the woman. He tried to move on, focusing on his business, but a nagging feeling gnawed at him. The events of that night had shaken him to his core. The sensation of being saved, of having his life touched by someone so powerful, stayed with him. He couldn't ignore it. Then, one evening, just as he was about to give up, he received an unexpected call. It was a woman's voice, soft, confident, and unmistakable. "I know you've been looking for me," she said, her words carrying an unshakable calm. "But the time to meet isn't yet. The truth will come when you are ready for it." His heart raced. It was her. The woman. And somehow, she knew everything about him. She knew that he had been searching for her, that he couldn't stop thinking about her. The billionaire felt a mix of shock and awe. How was it possible that this woman had known he was looking for her? The call ended abruptly before he could ask any more questions. But one thing was clear, she wasn't an ordinary woman. There was something more to her, something far deeper than he could have ever imagined. And now, the journey to uncover her true identity, and the secret she carried, had truly begun. Every fiber of his being screamed that this was no coincidence. He had been saved for a reason. And as he prepared himself for whatever would come next, he realized that this woman, with her mysterious power, would change his life in ways he could never have anticipated. The billionaire spent the next few days in a state of uneasy anticipation, unsure of what would happen next. The woman's voice echoed in his mind, her words haunting him, "The truth will come when you are ready for it." But what did that mean? Was he truly ready for what she had to reveal? His life, once dominated by facts, data, and careful control, now felt like an unpredictable whirlwind. His every move seemed to be drawing him closer to an unknown destiny, and no matter how much he tried to focus on his work, her presence lingered, a constant reminder that something extraordinary was unfolding right before him. He found himself walking the streets at night, unable to sleep, restless with the need to understand more about her. His thoughts were consumed by the idea that the woman who had saved him was no ordinary person. She was something else. Days passed without any further communication from her, but the billionaire's curiosity grew stronger. He reached out again to the private investigators, urging them to dig deeper, but they came up empty. There were no records of her, no trace of her existence anywhere. It was as though she had appeared out of nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. Then, one evening, as he sat alone in his study, staring at the city skyline through the window, he heard a soft knock at his door. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be her? Could this finally be the moment? When he opened the door, he was met with a sight that made him freeze in his tracks. There she was, the woman. She stood before him, as calm and composed as she had been the night of the crash, her eyes fixed on his with an intensity that took him by surprise. This time, however, something was different. There was a sense of quiet power around her, something that seemed to radiate from within. Without a word, she stepped inside, her presence filling the room in a way that was almost overwhelming. He didn't know what to say. His mind raced with questions, but they all seemed insignificant in the face of the mystery that stood before him. "I told you the truth would come," she said, her voice steady. "And now, it's time for you to understand." Before he could respond, she reached out, placing her hand gently on his arm. In that instant, everything changed. The world around him seemed to blur and fade as a rush of emotions and visions flooded his mind. He saw flashes of things, strange, powerful images that didn't make sense at first. But then, they began to come together. He saw himself, but not as he was now. He was younger, in a different place, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. He saw a family, his family, but it wasn't what he expected. There were children, laughter, and a sense of peace that he had never experienced before. Then, the image shifted again, showing him something even more unexpected, a child, a girl. She was beautiful, with eyes that seemed to hold an ancient wisdom, and there was something about her that made his heart ache. His vision was interrupted as quickly as it had come, and he found himself back in his study, gasping for breath. He looked at the woman, his mind reeling from the overwhelming flood of images and emotions. "What was that?" he whispered. She smiled, her expression softening for the first time. "That was a glimpse of what you can't yet see. But it's real. It's a future that has yet to unfold, and it's tied to you in ways that you cannot understand. But you will. In time." The billionaire stood there, stunned, as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. Was it some kind of vision? Or had she somehow tapped into his deepest desires, showing him things he never knew he needed to see? Before he could ask more questions, she turned to leave, her hand gently brushing his arm as she did. "This is only the beginning," she said quietly, almost as if to herself. "You will learn more soon. But first, you must be ready." And with that, she was gone, vanishing as quickly as she had appeared, leaving the billionaire alone in his study, his heart pounding in his chest. The strange images and the powerful emotions still lingered in his mind, leaving him shaken and more confused than ever. He had seen something that had touched him in ways words couldn't explain. A future, a family, a connection that seemed impossible. But he knew one thing for certain: this woman, this mysterious figure, was more than just a stranger who had saved his life. She was the key to something much bigger, something he had yet to fully grasp. And as the night stretched on, the billionaire couldn't help but wonder, what kind of miracle was this woman capable of? And how would it change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine? The billionaire's mind raced with the images from the vision, the child, the family, the deep sense of connection he had felt. Each time he tried to make sense of it, the pieces eluded him, slipping away like sand through his fingers. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something far deeper at play here, something that went beyond a simple act of kindness. For days, he thought about the vision, analyzing every detail, but no answers came. The woman, the mysterious savior who had saved his life, had shown him a glimpse of a future that seemed both familiar and foreign. Who was the child? And what did it have to do with him? Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to reach out again, to follow the thread wherever it led. His first stop was to look into his own past, something he had avoided for years. As a billionaire, he had always kept his past at arm's length, too focused on his empire to dwell on old memories. But now, something felt different. There was a pull, a need to understand the connections he had long buried. He hired a team of researchers, tasking them with investigating his family history. The information that came back was startling. He learned that many of his family's records were sealed, hidden away, as if someone didn't want certain details coming to light. His parents, long deceased, had left behind a trail of secrets that seemed to go beyond typical family matters. But one thing stood out, a name. A name he had never heard before, tied to a branch of his family that had been long lost to time. A woman's name. A name that was eerily familiar to him. The black woman who had saved his life. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The connection was undeniable. The mysterious woman, the one who had appeared at just the right moment, wasn't just a stranger, she was part of his family, a long-lost relative. But how? And why hadn't he known about her? Desperate for answers, he reached out to his family's old estate, hoping to find someone who could shed light on this mystery. But the more he dug, the more questions arose. No one seemed to know anything about her, yet there were whispers, hints of a family that had been forgotten, cast aside. The billionaire couldn't ignore the possibility that she had known about her connection to him all along. Perhaps she had known the truth about her lineage, even when he hadn't. And now, she had saved his life. But why? What had driven her to act when no one else could? What was her true purpose in his life? His search led him to an old, dusty journal that had been kept by one of his ancestors. Flipping through its yellowed pages, he found mention of a woman, his great-great-grandmother, who had been part of a secret lineage. This woman, too, had been tied to a powerful legacy that spanned generations. The connections were starting to piece together, but still, there was something missing. Then, buried deep in the journal, he found a drawing, an old, faded sketch of a young girl. The girl looked eerily like the child he had seen in his vision. The same eyes, the same knowing expression. His heart stopped as he realized the truth. The child in the vision wasn't just a random stranger. She was his own blood. Everything clicked into place, but the implications were staggering. The woman who had saved him, the mysterious figure who had appeared from nowhere, was not only a part of his family's past, she was the key to his future. She was a link to a legacy that he couldn't fully comprehend, but one that had been waiting for him to discover. And with this discovery came a powerful, yet terrifying realization: the life he had built, the empire he had created, was all based on a foundation of secrets. His entire existence had been shaped by things he had never known. But now, with this knowledge, he was at a crossroads. What would he do with it? How would he move forward? The billionaire stood in the dim light of his study, staring at the journal, his thoughts swirling. The answers were within his reach, but the path ahead was uncertain. The woman, the mysterious savior, had changed everything. And now, it was time to face the truth. What would he uncover next? And how would it reshape everything he thought he knew about his family, and himself? The billionaire sat in the dim light of his study, his hands trembling slightly as he set the journal down on the desk in front of him. His mind swirled with the revelations of the past few days. His entire life, his entire empire, had been built on secrets. And now those secrets were unraveling, leading him to an undeniable conclusion: the woman who had saved his life wasn't just a savior, she was part of a hidden legacy, a legacy that stretched back generations. As the days passed, he became consumed by the discovery. His obsession with finding answers grew stronger. He knew there was more to the story, but each step forward seemed to bring with it new questions, new complications. And with each revelation, he realized that the price of knowledge was far higher than he had anticipated. One evening, as he sat at his desk, his thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. It was the woman, the mysterious figure who had saved him, who had changed everything. Her voice was calm and steady as always, but this time, there was something different about it. A sense of urgency. "We need to talk," she said. "You're starting to understand, but there's still more you need to know. The truth is dangerous, and I need you to be ready for it." The billionaire's heart raced. He had been waiting for this moment, this conversation, but now that it was finally here, he felt a deep sense of unease. "What do you mean? What truth?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, her voice came through, steady but full of weight. "The power that you're uncovering, the legacy that's been hidden from you, it comes with a price. And you're not the only one looking for it." The billionaire's stomach twisted with a knot of fear. What was she talking about? Who else was after this power? He couldn't help but think of the family connections, the legacy that seemed to be tied to everything, the child he had seen in his vision, the woman who had saved him. It was all starting to feel like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. "I don't understand," he said, his voice quiet. "What price are you talking about?" She sighed softly, as if the weight of the situation was pressing down on her. "You're about to inherit something far more dangerous than you realize. A power that has been passed down through generations. It's not just about wealth or legacy. It's about control over things that people can't even begin to comprehend." The billionaire was silent, the implications of her words sinking in. Control over things people couldn't comprehend? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. What kind of power was she talking about? And why had it been hidden for so long? "I need you to understand," she continued, "that the more you uncover, the more you will be targeted. There are people who will stop at nothing to control this power, and they will use any means necessary to get to you." His mind was racing. The billionaire had always been accustomed to power, he had built his empire on it. But this was different. This was something beyond his control, something that had been hidden from him for reasons he couldn't yet understand. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He hesitated, but the sound of footsteps approaching made him look up sharply. The door creaked open, and a man in a dark suit stepped inside. His face was unreadable, but his eyes locked onto the billionaire with an intensity that sent a chill through him. "This is the price of power," the woman's voice whispered in his mind. The man stepped closer, his gaze never wavering. "I think it's time we have a conversation, Mr. H. There are things you don't know, things that need to be set right." The billionaire felt the weight of the situation bear down on him. He had been thrust into a world of hidden power, family secrets, and dangerous people. And now, as the man in the suit stood before him, he realized that the price of everything he had uncovered was about to be paid. The game had changed. The stakes were higher than ever. And he was no longer just a man of wealth and influence, he was a man caught in a battle for something far more dangerous. The question that hung in the air was simple: how far would he go to uncover the truth? And what would be the cost? The billionaire's journey had only just begun. And the price of this power, this legacy, was one he wasn't sure he was ready to pay. The billionaire stared at the man in the suit, his heart pounding in his chest. The tension in the room was palpable, like a silent battle being waged between them. He didn't know who this man was, but one thing was clear: he wasn't here by coincidence. This was no ordinary visitor, he was a part of something much bigger. The man in the suit, his presence cold and authoritative, stepped further into the room, his eyes never leaving the billionaire's. "You've started to uncover things that you weren't supposed to know," the man said, his voice low but laced with power. "And now, you've become a liability." The billionaire felt the weight of those words sink into his bones. Liability. The word echoed in his mind. What did the man mean by that? Had he truly uncovered something dangerous, something that made him a target? Before he could respond, the man continued, his words dripping with an eerie calmness. "You've stirred the pot, Mr. H. And now, the consequences of your actions are coming home to roost." The billionaire stood up, his thoughts racing. He was no stranger to power struggles, to dangerous deals, and the politics of influence. But this was different. What had he stumbled upon? What kind of power was he dealing with? The man's lips curled into a knowing smile. You're not the first to seek answers. There have been others before you, people who thought they could control it. And all of them failed. The billionaire's stomach twisted. Control it? What was this man talking about? What was it? Whatever it is you're after, Mr. H, the man said, stepping closer, it's already too late. The game has begun, and you're just a pawn. The power that you've uncovered, it's not something you can control. It controls you. In that moment, something inside the billionaire snapped. He had spent his life fighting for control, building an empire, achieving everything he had ever wanted. And now, some stranger was telling him that he was just a pawn in a game he didn't understand? That was something he couldn't accept. I'm not a pawn, the billionaire said, his voice sharp with determination. I don't lose control. The man chuckled darkly, unfazed by the billionaire's defiance. You don't have a choice. There are forces at play here that you can't even begin to comprehend. The legacy you're trying to claim, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to something far older, far more powerful. And those who try to take it are destined to fall. A cold sweat formed on the billionaire's forehead as he began to grasp the gravity of the situation. He had been chasing shadows, trying to uncover the truth about the mysterious woman, about his family's hidden legacy. But now, it was clear, the truth was far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The billionaire's thoughts turned to the woman, the one who had saved him, the one who had led him down this path. She was the key to everything. But had she known about this danger all along? Had she brought him into this world for a reason? Or was she also a pawn in someone else's game? Suddenly, the billionaire realized that the stakes were far higher than his own life. He wasn't just fighting for answers anymore, he was fighting for survival. For control. For the future of his family, and for the legacy that had been hidden for so long. Tell me what you know, the billionaire demanded, his voice steady but full of urgency. Who are you? And what is this power that I've uncovered? The man's smile faded, replaced by a cold seriousness. You'll find out soon enough. But be warned, this isn't a game you can walk away from. Once you're in, there's no going back. As the man turned and walked toward the door, the billionaire's heart raced. The world around him felt like it was closing in, the walls pressing tighter with every passing second. He had uncovered something that was never meant to be found. Something that would change everything. The billionaire had made a choice when he started this journey, a choice to seek the truth, to uncover the mysteries surrounding his family and the woman who had saved him. But now, he realized that every choice had consequences. And the price of the truth was one he might not be willing to pay. The door clicked shut behind the man, leaving the billionaire standing in the silence of his study, his mind in turmoil. The ultimate test had begun. And he had no idea where it would lead. Would he give in to the power, or would he find a way to control it? The answers were just out of reach, but one thing was certain, the world he knew was gone. And in its place was a new, darker reality that he had to face head-on. The billionaire stood frozen in his study, the man in the suit having left him with more questions than answers. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, frustration, and fear. What had he gotten himself into? He had always prided himself on being in control, of knowing every angle, every risk. But now, everything felt out of his grasp. The power he had uncovered, the strange woman, the family legacy, none of it made sense. It was as if he had opened a door to a world he wasn't meant to see, and now, he couldn't close it. In the days that followed, the billionaire tried to make sense of what he had learned. The visions, the strange connection to the woman, the dangerous forces lurking in the shadows, it all seemed too much to bear. But no matter how much he tried to ignore it, the pull of the truth was too strong. He couldn't turn away. The weight of the secrets, the legacy that had been hidden from him for so long, was something he couldn't ignore any longer. One evening, as he sat alone in his office, the phone rang. It was her again. The woman. Her voice, calm and steady as always, cut through the chaos in his mind. "You're at a crossroads, Mr. H," she said. "The choices you make now will determine everything. You've seen the power, felt its weight. But now, it's time to decide what you'll do with it." Her words were a sharp reminder of the path he had chosen. The stakes were higher than ever. The billionaire had spent his life building an empire, fighting for control, but now, he was facing something far more dangerous than any business deal or market crash. He was up against something ancient, something that had been hidden from him for a reason. "I don't know what to do anymore," he confessed, his voice raw with frustration. "I thought I could control this, but it's too much. I don't even know what I'm dealing with." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then she spoke again, her tone softer now, almost compassionate. "You're not meant to control it," she said gently. "You're meant to understand it. Power isn't about control, Mr. H. It's about responsibility. You've been given a gift, a legacy that stretches beyond anything you can imagine. But it's not a gift you can own. It's something that requires you to give, not take." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. A gift? He had thought of this power as something to be wielded, something to be controlled and used for his own gain. But now, she was telling him that it wasn't his to own, that it was something greater than him, something that demanded respect and humility. For the first time, the billionaire began to see the situation through a different lens. He had been so focused on building his empire, on acquiring more power and control, that he had lost sight of what truly mattered. His family, the woman, the legacy, they weren't pieces in a game to be won. They were a part of something much larger, something that had been passed down through generations, and now it was his turn to carry the responsibility. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words settle into his chest. It was overwhelming, but it was also freeing. The pressure to control everything, to be the one who made all the decisions, was something he had carried for so long. But now, he understood that true strength wasn't about control, it was about wisdom, humility, and knowing when to step back and let go. "I think I understand now," he said quietly. "This power, it's not mine to possess. It's mine to protect, to carry forward. And if I'm going to do that, I need to stop trying to control everything." The woman's voice softened. "Exactly. And now, you're ready. The truth will unfold, but it will do so on its own terms. You don't need to force it." As the call ended, the billionaire sat in silence, the weight of the lesson sinking in. He had spent his life chasing power, but now he realized that true power wasn't in domination, it was in understanding. Understanding the legacy, the connections, and the responsibility that came with it. He couldn't change the past, but he could shape the future. And that future wasn't about him, it was about everyone who had come before him, and everyone who would come after. For the first time in a long time, the billionaire felt a sense of peace. The storm of confusion and fear that had clouded his mind began to clear. He was ready to face whatever came next, not as a man trying to control everything, but as someone who had learned the true value of power, the ability to give, to protect, and to respect what had been entrusted to him. The lesson he had learned was simple, yet profound: real power doesn't come from what you own or control. It comes from what you are willing to give, what you are willing to protect, and how you choose to carry the weight of the past into the future. And with that, the billionaire finally understood that the journey he had been on wasn't just about uncovering secrets or gaining power, it was about learning to be the person who could carry the legacy, with all its weight and responsibility, into the future.